Big update on this off day for the 49ers. They've already decided to sign at least one player, a local tight end, Josiah Deguara. And of course, much worse news on the Ricky Pearsall front. But some key questions to be answered, including a very simple one that many have asked me. Why didn't Pearsall and the 49ers opt for surgery to begin this past offseason? Because all options are on the table now. He is dealing with an injury to the same knee that compromised his 2025 season. It's a PCL injury that the 49ers and Pearsall obviously hoped would heal itself with rehab over the course of this past offseason, but now that his knee is swelling again, the healing obviously has not completed itself in full. So with all options on the table, surgery obviously is a possibility now. For that, here from Treasure Island, and we'll take a look at Treasure Island in a little bit. Beautiful reconstruction going on here, old and new, San Francisco skyline. But for that, we should check in with Nirav Pandya. Doctor on social media does a really good job explaining these situations, and take a look at his tweet yesterday about Ricky Pearsall and PCL injuries. In general, the vast majority of PCL injuries are managed non-operatively, so without surgery, especially if they are isolated. If patients become symptomatic with swelling, pain, or instability, and we know that Pearsall, after Monday's practice, became symptomatic with swelling, then surgery can be performed. Sometimes the symptoms won't creep up until players really start doing intensive activities, which explains why this happened in this timing for Ricky Pearsall, because intensive activity didn't really start until training camp. You can't really simulate what 11-on-11 football is like until you actually have to perform in 11-on-11 context. The reason to try and delay PCL surgery is that reconstruction has a long recovery process, 9 to 12 months, and results are mixed, especially at an agility position like wide receiver. So that 9 to 12 month timeline is really, really important to keep in mind, because if Pearsall had undergone surgery to begin last offseason, probably would have missed time, might have missed the entire 2026 season anyway. And there would have been no guarantee that he'd be back to his original pre-injury self. So you can see why the 49ers and Ricky Pearsall opted against the surgery, because it was such a risky path. That being said, if the conservative path does not yield results, and if it hasn't yielded results for nearly a year at this point, and you have to start considering the riskier path, because the riskier path actually ends up being less risky than staying put. And I think that's where the 49ers and Ricky Pearsall are at right now. It's all tremendously unfortunate because, as we've said many times before, Ricky Pearsall did not miss a single game in his college career. Not a single game. And the only injury that's caused him to miss game time in the NFL has been this one PCL injury. Obviously not counting the shooting in San Francisco in 2024. That was not a football injury for Ricky Pearsall. But he came back from that shooting, finished that 2024 rookie season exceptionally well. Then he showed up in 2025, and the first 4 games before he suffered this PCL injury, Ricky Pearsall was one of the best receivers in all football. A lot of people get the actual injury play wrong. He did hurt his ankle due to the hip drop tackle that wasn't called against Jacksonville early on, but he came back from that injury. He didn't suffer this PCL injury until later in that game when his knee slammed the ground on what should have been a catch along the sideline. The officials screwed over Ricky Pearsall twice in that game. They didn't call the hip drop, and then they didn't call the toe tap, what should have been a catch, a reception on the field, and he ended up hurting his PCL on that play. He slammed his knee into the ground, just like Christian McCaffrey slammed his knee into the ground in Buffalo in that snow game, and that caused the PCL for Christian McCaffrey. Well, for Ricky Pearsall, it wasn't a 6-week recovery like it was for McCaffrey in that 2024 season. For whatever reason, it stuck with Pearsall. He missed more than 6 weeks, And even when he returned, he wasn't at 100% last year. Now, obviously, one could argue that the 49ers could have just shut Ricky Pearsall down after week 4 and had him undergo the surgery then. But that seems to be a very hindsight is 2020 type of argument. Because Christian McCaffrey was able to return. I know that there were no games for the 49ers once the season ended in 2024, but he would have been able to play had the 49ers made the playoffs that season. Most of these PCL injuries proceed without needing surgery, and the player can be back about 6 weeks after they happen. For Ricky Pearsall, that obviously wasn't the case. So it didn't follow the common trend, and now the much more invasive and much riskier process of surgery is being strongly considered. 49ers, therefore, cannot count on anything from Ricky Pearsall this season. It's a good thing they built receiver depth around him. There's a reason why they drafted De'Zhaun Stribling. Obviously, they signed Mike Evans. That was a big win for this team, and they're hoping that somebody like Jordan Watkins, maybe even Jacob Cowing, can give them what they need this year. I've pointed out many times on social media now over the course of the past couple days that it is not wise to look at this in terms of wide receiver 1, 2, and 3. The 49ers, that's a fantasy football way of looking at things. The 49ers are going to look at this in terms of the X, which is Mike Evans. They're going to look at this in terms of the Z receiver position, which is Ricky Pearsall, but they did sign Christian Kirk, who right now also is sidelined with a calf strain, which is problematic. But they're going to look at the Z position, the flanker position, as a very specific need to fill, which is why they worked out those 3 wide receivers, including Trenton Irwin, who played with Christian McCaffrey at Stanford. And then they're going to look at the F position, which is the slot, which is what they have earmarked for De'Zhaun Stribling at this point. De'Zhaun Stribling is somebody who I think can bring them Jawan Jennings' physical skill set as far as size and strength go, but brings 4.36 speed to the table. Could be a real matchup nightmare at that F big slot spot. I don't think that they want to move De'Zhaun Stribling full-time to the flanker role. I think that they look at him as either an F or eventually an X, which is where Mike Evans is. I think that the Z, vacated right now by Ricky Pearsall for as long as he's unavailable, that's where the 49ers have to fill the gap. A lot of people right now are talking about Deebo Samuel because he's a free agent, and yes, he did play the Z for the 49ers back in the day. But the offense looked different, and the quarterback situation was much different than it is now. When the 49ers moved to Brock Purdy, he was a much more aggressive and accurate downfield passer than what the 49ers had worked with at QB before. They moved away from the Deebo Samuel archetype at the Z position, and they started looking to the future, and that's where the Ricky Pearsall archetype came in. And I think that their thinking was sound because when Ricky Pearsall has been healthy, he has paired extremely well with Brock Purdy as a guy who averages well more than 2.3, 2.4 yards per route run, which is really, really good. Now with Pearsall maybe unavailable, maybe for the whole season, again, we don't know. We'll have to see. The question is, how do the 49ers refill that Z position? Christian Kirk would match that archetype much better than Deebo Samuel because of his speed and his downfield separation ability. I think within the context of a Brock Purdy offense, especially at this age, since Deebo is not 2021 Deebo anymore, Deebo Samuel is still a gadget weapon in the context of the 49ers offense. Now, with an open receiver spot, maybe they ultimately do bring him in, but I think it's wishful thinking to see Deebo Samuel as somebody that is plug and play into the Z receiver position to keep the 49ers offense on the humming trajectory that it's been on ever since Brock Purdy has been the starting quarterback for the 49ers. So I think it's just imperative to look at this in terms of X, Z, and F, in terms of skill sets, in terms of who can fill in where for the 49ers, because people will just toss out names as if names are the end-all be-all to pick up the slack, and the way that the 49ers are built, much more downfield oriented now for Purdy, timing oriented downfield. It's not as much of a yak offense. The way that the 49ers are built makes us look at Deebo Samuel through the gadget player lens more than through the prototypical Z receiver lens. Now, as far as Pearsall goes, this is year 3 for him. So he still has 1 more year under contract with the 49ers, year 4. Next offseason, coming up here in 2027, they decide if they want to pick up the 5th-year option on Ricky Pearsall, which would keep him under contract as a first-round pick for 1 more season. If he doesn't play here in 2026, I think it's very unlikely that the 49ers pick up that 5th-year option. So there is quite a bit on the line right now. It would turn 2027 into an absolute prove-it year, coming off of a presumed surgery if he doesn't play here in 2026. So the wheels are spinning when it comes to the decision-making process and the long-term setup of how the 49ers are going to build this receiver room. Somebody like De'Zhaun Stribling, because he was picked at number 33 in the 2nd round, the 49ers will not have that 5th-year option on him. 4 years under contract for De'Zhaun Stribling, but obviously still at the very, very start of that. Mike Evans under team control for 3 years, but 33 years old this season. A couple of the younger guys, Jordan Watkins and Jacob Cowing. Watkins especially because he's bigger than Jacob Cowing. Intriguing to me as a potential wild card this season because his size can allow him to fill multiple different wide receiver roles. Same can be said about Demarcus Robinson, who's under the final year of a 2-year deal, but he's an older veteran who now with Ricky Pearsall in such question, I think it's essentially a lock that Demarcus Robinson will make this 49ers roster. Let's take a look at Treasure Island before we go through the signing that the 49ers made of Josiah Deguara, the tight end. So they're redeveloping Treasure Island. This used to be a big Navy base. It's a man-made island, by the way. That's why it's so flat. If you look over this way, that's Yerba Buena Island. That one is not man-made, hence the hill. The Bay Bridge actually runs through Yerba Buena Island, but Yerba Buena Island is connected to Treasure Island. That building right there, it's Building 1, the administration building on Treasure Island, was built back in 1938 for the Golden Gate International Exposition, and it was originally designed as the terminal for Pan Am, the former airline's flying boats, which is why it has doubled as an airport in some famous movies. Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade was the Berlin airport in that movie. It was in The Parent Trap. It was the exterior of a luxury hotel in The Parent Trap, though. So not an airport, but famous building here at Treasure Island, where you can now live and take the ferry. I think it's like a 6-minute ride to the ferry building in downtown San Francisco. So Josiah Deguara, this new tight end, the 49ers are going to have to make a roster move to fit him. They might make it ahead of practice tomorrow. He joins a room that is obviously beleaguered right now with George Kittle still on the PUP list. Jake Tonjes has been playing well, though, for the 49ers here over training camp. More of the same from Jake Tonjes, one of the more underappreciated 49ers, local kid, went to Los Gatos High School. Well, now Deguara also has a local resume, was born in Santa Rosa and then went to high school in the Sacramento area. Folsom is really a football factory. That whole area east of the central part of Sacramento has produced so many professional athletes, and that is where Josiah Deguara played his college football. 6'2", 240, so he's smaller, more of a Kyle Juszczyk build than the 49ers' taller tight ends. And we know that tight end and fullback for the 49ers have been relatively interchangeable positions. Kyle Juszczyk actually played more snaps last year aligned at tight end than he did at fullback. Deguara did go to Cincinnati. That is the Kelsey brothers' school, speaking of the tight end, and he was picked in the 3rd round by the Packers. So he's been in a Matt LaFleur offense. Then he went to Jacksonville in 2024 and was with the Arizona Cardinals last year. 51 catches on his career. So Josiah Deguara, latest 49ers addition. And, you know, depending on what they do with Ricky Pearsall, if they shut him down with an actual surgery, they could just put him on injured reserve. He would stay under contractual control, but open up a roster spot. They can't put Ricky Pearsall on PUP. That's only available to players before training camp actually starts. Once you've practiced in training camp, you cannot go on PUP or NFI. So that is not an option. And even then, he would still count against the 90-man roster. If he's going to be done for the season, I don't know if that's going to be the case, but right now we do not sense a lot of optimism coming out of the 49ers building. Then you would want to put him on injured reserve so he's not taking up one of those roster spots. And then that would allow for a corresponding move from San Francisco. So that's the off-day news. 49ers have to proceed forward. The good news is that De'Zhaun Stribling has looked awesome. I am working on a big rookie update for you guys, and it started very, very well for De'Zhaun Stribling and for Kalon Black. Actually went to Taqueria San Bruno. Maybe I give you a sneak peek of that, but I went to Taqueria San Bruno by SFO to start the rookie video. That's going to be dropping soon. 49ers are going to be leaning on their existing playmakers to pick up the slack for Ricky Pearsall, at least for the short term and maybe for the long term as well. And just terribly unfortunate news if this drags out that long, because Ricky Pearsall has been so good when he's been healthy, and he didn't miss any games in college. And now, very frustratingly, that PCL injury continues to linger.